Hello students. Now today we are just going to discuss about the class 9th second chapter of science, that's name is matter around us pure? Okay. Now in this chapter what the topic we are going to see, because see most of the topic which we have already discussed. Okay. Our last class was about the concentrations of solutions, and in that we have seen that how we can find the concentrations of the solute which has been dissolved in the solution, and that the concentration of solutions can be found in the percentage. That's why the topic name is concentrations of the solution, in which we have seen the three major types: mass by mass, percentage. The word percentage is coming because the final answer which are coming are always comes in a percentage, in a percent way. That's why mass by mass percentage of the solutions, second was your mass by volume percentage of the solutions, and the third was your volume by volume percentage of the solutions. After that, the next topic which we have to discuss, because as you earlier if you have just gone through the chapter, in which the beginning of the chapter I have drawn the is tabular form, there's classifications of the matter. In that classification of matter we have basically seen in the heterogeneous submixture that the heterogeneous has been further classified, divided into the two parts, that is your one is your suspension and the second one is your colloidal solutions. Okay. So about that, first we are going to discuss about this topic, suspension and its properties, that what are the suspension, how can we say that the particular given the solutions, so the mixtures which are present in ourselves, that is a particular example of your suspension we can find by these properties and by the definitions of suspension. Okay. So see, first of all, if we are talking about the suspension, the three major things which we have to keep in our mind, that if we are just handling, we are going through the solution. The first point is your suspension is a heterogeneous mixture, and I am very much sure that you all knows the meaning of heterogeneous substances. Heterogeneous substances, that means the mixtures in which the particles are ununiformly distributed, that is randomly in the motions, that is the heterogeneous substances. So in that, suspension is your heterogeneous mixture. Now next point is, if we are talking about the size, because every particle has its different size, then on the basis of the particle size, how we can, the major thing is that only that on the basis of the particle size we can identify that which one the solution is, either the heterogeneous, homogeneous, suspension, colloidal, and whatever the other things. Okay. So on the basis of the particle, as you can see, it has been given the size of the particle is 10 to the power minus 6 in diameter. That means the particles are present in the sphere, and if there is the sphere, that in the diameter we can find it. So the particle size is around, that is not the 100% exact perfect, it's the approximate, that the particle size is around 10 to the power minus 6 meter in diameter. That is the main concept about the particle size, if we are talking about the suspension, by which we can see this much size, 10 to the power minus 6 meter, is so large as compared to the other particles, that they can be easily visible to us. For example, if we are talking about the sand and water, in which whenever the sand if you are trying to dissolve that in the water, then sand cannot be dissolved in the water because it is a heterogeneous substances. Okay. And if with the sand and the water will remain for long interval of time, or for the short interval of time, then we will find that what the sand particles are easily visible, and that all the sand particles has been deposited at the bottom of the container because of its size, and that is the best example of your suspension. Now see, here it has been given the third major point, because in suspension might be the particle are heavy also and the light also. Understood? So on the that concept, on the particles heavy and light concept, the heavy particles of the suspension deposited at the bottom of the container, and the light particles remain suspended in the solutions. The heavy particles, because heavy particle cannot dissolve in the solution, so when that solution remains undisturbed for the few interval of times, then what happen, whatever the heavy particles of the suspension, they will just remain and goes down at the bottom of the container. And if we are talking about the light particles, that light particles are so light that they can't deposited at the bottom of the container. Instead of them, they just remain suspended in the solution. Simple सा meaning है remain suspended in the solution, मतलब वो पूरा हमारा solution में घूमता हुआ नजर आएगा. For example, the basic concept for about the suspension, if you say the chalk powder and water, if you dissolve the some of the chalk powder in the water, then after some time if you observe that the heavy particle of the chalk powder has been deposited at the bottom of the container, whereas the light particle of the chalk will still remain suspended in the solution, and due to that only the solutions appears as a milky white in color. Understood? That is the major thing which we have to see about the suspension, and by that only we can identify that whatever substances which are present in ourselves, whether it is a suspension or the collider. Understood everyone? So next we have to see about the properties of suspension. Then that what are the properties, or if we are talking about the suspension, then apart from the rest of the 3 points which we have discussed right now, apart from that, on which concept, on which properties we will identify, we can say that it is a suspension. Okay. So first point, it is a heterogeneous mixture. Obviously there is no any confusions about that, because in the suspension only we have seen that is the heterogeneous mixtures. Okay. Now next, the particle is the property is the particles can be visible by our naked eyes because of its size. Its size are too big as compared to the other particles, that if we still dissolve the particles in this solvent in the water, then we can easily identify the particles which has been added. Understood? That is the major concept, that the particles can be easily visible by our naked eyes. Next properties is your suspension can scatter a beam of light, the most important concept, because in the class 8 in the light chapter, as you have already seen, that the concept, the topic is scattering of light. Whenever the light ray pass from one end to the another end, and we can easily the path of the light can easily visible, then that is known as the scattering of light. So here in this suspension also, if suppose say I have drawn one diagram also, suppose that this beaker is a suspension solution, okay, and in which if we at the one end, if we pass the laser light, then what will identify that the laser light is passing from the other end. Apart from that, the most important thing is that in this solution we can easily identify that whatever the straight path is of the laser light is going from one end to another end, that path is clearly visible. As you can see, I have drawn the yellow line that represent the visible of the light can be easily visible to us, and that's the meaning of the scattering of light. Understood? The most important thing we have to discuss, that the scattering of light. Okay. Now the last property which is the property of the suspension is that the particles can't pass through filter paper. That's why suspension can be separated by the process of filtration. I think that most of the students, you all have observed the filter paper in our chemistry lab in our schools. It can be easily available. If it is not if you haven't seen, then consult your chemistry teacher or the science teacher in your school and ask to show you the filter paper. It's in the shape of the circle, just white, it is in the white color, that's filter paper. It is a circle shape. Okay, so that is the filter paper, and what did happen, the particles can't be passed through the filter paper because of the size. Understood now? Its size are too big that through the filter paper the particles can't pass from one end to another end, and that's the reason the parts that the size of the particles, as well as that's why it cannot pass through the filter paper. That's why the filter is the separations of the suspension can be possible by the process of filtration. Understood? Filtration simple meaning साफ करके अलग निकाल देगा. For example, as you can see here, I have drawn one diagram also. We have see, yellow part is your filter paper. This conical shape is your conical flask, and this is one beaker. Okay, as you can see, I have already poured the such suspensions mixtures in the filter paper, and what you have observed that all the particles which are present in this suspension, they are easily available on this sandpaper. So filter paper, as you can see, in the yellow color is your filter paper, and in that filter paper white dotted line I have drawn, that shows that it's the part of the suspension, and that's why the particles cannot pass through the filter paper, because the particles haven't passed from the filter paper, and due to this the whatever the solutions is there, the suspension, the particles will be removed, and once the particle will be removed, the separations can be easily available. As you can see in the bottom of the container, whatever we have got the fresh water. Understood? That is the major thing which we have to focus in our mind whenever if we are going through the suspension and its property. Understood now? By this the 3 points which we have discussed in the beginning of the class, apart from that the 4 major points, by this 3 plus 7, 3 plus 4, 7 points we have to keep in our mind just whenever if we are discussing or handling any questions regarding from the suspension. Okay, so thank you for that. That's for the today class. In the next class we will see through the colloidal solution, that what's the properties of the colloidal solution, what are the colloidal solutions, and we'll talk the colloidal solutions on the basis of its particles. Okay, thank you.
परंतु वाइंड से प्रोसेस ना हो पाएगा।
हाँ वही सर परसों से ही हो पाएगा ना, क्योंकि कल तो टाइमिंग भी देंगे।